Okay, so first of all, thank you for coming and welcome. So let's start. So today's topic is how to secure APIs on AWS, and we will give accent to the function as a service. And like the usual story, so about me. So I'm Jovica, IT consultant at CodeCentric. My current focus is on cloud computing and serverless architecture, and you can find me on Twitter using this Twitter handle. And also before I start, I want just to have a quick show of hands. Who's using the AWS in general, or at least tried it? Nice. Who used serverless framework for resources and so on? Okay. And the final one is who's using JavaScript? Okay. So let's start with a story. So when I was working with Lambda functions, so I started with, like, by default, you start creating functions with JavaScript. You do try different things, different events, what can happen inside a function, how you can write it, and how to connect to database, read stuff, basic CRUD operations. Then I moved to Golang because that's my language of choice. And eventually you want to expose your Lambdas to outside world. And to expose it, you will use API gateway, and then you have a single point of entry, and then API gateway will know by looking at the request which function to invoke. So I started with my app. So this is the unsecured version. So I created 3 Lambda functions, which they're talking to DynamoDB. I put it on the API gateway, and that's it. So it is publicly available, and everybody can use it. So this is the backend stuff, and then I wanted to connect with my backend, not using curl or whatever else, Postman, for example. So I started creating web applications and mobile applications just to see how this will work, and basically playing around with the front end and the back end. But then if I want to share with this with someone, and how to share my application. Everybody wants to have its own account and that it's using something depending on application if you don't want to have public application or public API. So I started looking in the AWS. So how can I secure my Lambdas, or how can I secure my gateway? By default, everything so when you first create the API gateway for something, everything is unsecured. And it has, so API gateway has a concept of authorizers, and by default it's set to none. Later on, I will show how it looks like in the AWS console so that everybody can see that. But there is also something that you can create a custom authorizer so that you can implement your custom logic depending on the authorizer headers, some parameters and so on. Then you can implement your logic to grant access to your AWS resources or deny it and say access denied. And so I can create custom authorizer, but I don't want to. So I want to have like user management system, and I don't want to spend too much time creating these users. And by exploring the AWS, I found out that we have Aws Cognito. This is the first sentence that's on their webpage, which is something that I was looking for. So I want a simple and secure user sign up, sign in, and access control. And so when I read the sentence, I was like, cool, I need that. Tell me more. And then Cognito has 2 services. They are, at the same time, they are the same or similar, but with one major difference. The first one is user pools. User pools, and I will show you later how it looks like when we see the demo and everything else. So User pools, they are a user management directory for your application. And you get all the things that general user management has. So the user sign up, sign in, you have groups, and so on. But on the other hand, identity pools, also called federated identities, is a way to give, so everything in AWS is secured by IAM policies. And you need to have a policy to give access to some of the service inside the AWS. So that is exactly what identity pools are doing. So they are giving temporary roles to authenticated users from some identity providers. And those identity providers can be like Cognito user pools are one of the examples of identity providers, but others can also be like Facebook, Google, or some custom using the OpenID and SAML protocol. And that's the main difference between two of them. So I saw Cognito, and then I have, so my backend is now secured. I just need to tell my API gateway that my authorizer will be this role, temporary role that identity pool will give me. So that was it regarding the backend. And now for the front end. So for the front end, I also want the same thing. I don't want to lose time or to waste time to implement all the standard stuff for the signing up, signing in users. And I want to have something like abstract the way, because Cognito already has like SDKs for different types of languages. So it can, there is a JavaScript SDK for Java, for .NET, and basically whatever you want. But I was looking online and I found this. So this is Aws Amplify. The first sentence on their website is not so great, but it says that it's JavaScript library for application development using cloud services. And when I start reading through their documentation, I found out that they have a React Native, Angular, Vue.js, Ionic, and then whatever framework, or basically vanilla JavaScript if you want. And I was interested in React Native because I already worked with web applications. So I created many applications using React on web, but I didn't have so much experience with React Native. And how cool is it when I write React Native on the mobile app and just tell the mobile guys that I created something that I don't need to take care about security and so on. So this is how my secured version of application looks like. So I have my user, my mobile application with Aws Amplify. I have Aws Cognito, which then secures API gateway and the rest of the AWS resources that I'm using. Okay, so now it's time for the demo. This one is the last one. So Cognito, when I signed up for an account, Cognito is giving me confirmation code which I need to confirm to be able to create a user there. So I will take this code and then try to do it here, confirm, and I created an account and I'm automatically signed in. So like I said, it's not like a big application, but today, what you learned today, yeah, I learned something new. I will not make a joke that you need good Wi-Fi for this, but so I save it, I have my list, then I can just mark it, delete it, and I have my user profile, which I can update, and I can sign out. And that was pretty easy. Now let's get back on track. So this was the demo, and now I will show you how exactly to configure the user pools and identity pools for this. And for the rest of the part, I really need Wi-Fi. Okay, so as I said, Cognito has user pools and identity pools. So let's start first with user pools. So if I refresh here, this is the user pool I created. Yay. And this is me with the account I created. So this is my account, I'm confirmed, and so on. I cannot go all over the settings here because there are too many of them, but let's go briefly how to create a user pool, or to be precise, what I did to create a user pool for this application, because I just wanted something simple and that's it. So let's name this demo pool, and you can jump immediately to defaults where you have only the default setting, but you can also go through settings, which we will currently go through. So the first is, and when I was reading this, it was really not so complicated to understand what they're asking to create a user pool. So how do you want your users to sign in? I want to use an email. They also provide the phone numbers or both. If you use the phone numbers, you need to verify them. Then you can also have the SMS for the code, and you have ability to activate the MFA or the multi-factor authentication. So I checked, I want email addresses. This is the standard attributes that Cognito gives you, or I think this is from the OpenID that you have. So this is something that you can require during the sign up. If you leave it like it is, it's just email and the password, and that's it. I added a nickname, but I didn't require it because my point of updating the user profile is just to update the nickname, and then I can eventually use it for something else. And the custom attributes is, so you have the standard attributes, but you can create your own. For example, is this user a paid user or whatever you like, or which color do user like, and similar, depending on the use case. So that is. The next step is for the policies, and that's basically regarding the passwords and the password strength. So I left this all default because I'm always for strong passwords and so on. So I have minimum length and then requiring all other stuff. The things that you want to allow users to sign up themselves. So there are two options. Basically, administrator can create users, and then user will get an invitation link so that he creates the profile by filling the password, and that's it. Or you can allow them to sign up themselves, which I did in my application. And this is what happens to deactivate or delete account after a user is not reacted to the administration. So next step is I can enable multi-factor authentication, and I didn't activate it because I don't want it. I want just to have my user pools, and then everything is fine. But you can, and to be honest, I didn't go into much details about this MFA because I need to implement more stuff, and then my business logic is currently not so important for this, but there is option to do it. I want to require verification for my email, so I get the code, and I can also send an SMS messages, but I need to create a role. So everything else is default. I didn't change anything. And so if I open the email, so this is, I got till verification code, and your till verification code is something. And you can configure that via templates. So Cognito provides this like email subject and email message, so you enter your customized message for this one. Next is to customize your user invitation messages. The same story goes here, and then you can also customize your email addresses, so to from and to reply, you can also do that. I didn't need any of it, so moving on. So do you want to tag? Usually in AWS, it's a good practice to tag your resources so that eventually you can search your resources group by tags and so on. But I don't need that also. So next step. To remember user devices, so this is more about mobile. So when you have the MFA activated, you can remember user devices so that you know if user has multiple devices, so he can use it so that he doesn't always have to authenticate with MFA and so on. And then the app clients. So every user pool can have multiple clients. So in my case, I created one client, which is my React Native client, but I could also create a web client and client for iOS and so on. Depending on, maybe I want to, for the web client, I want to have a custom attribute to do something else, or I can create a specific application which will manage my users, in which group they belong, and so on. And it's simple, so I will show you how it looks like the client, so that we don't create it now. And the next one, and the last one, is the triggers. So this is really nice feature that I like, and I can see many use cases for this. For example, you have a pre-sign up. So it's a trigger when you start signing up. You can invoke a Lambda function to do something. Or you can have the post-authentication. So what will you do after authenticated or post-confirmation and so on. For example, one of the examples that would be nice is when user signs up, confirm his account, send the messages to, I don't know, marketing team to do something with it, or to send the message SMS, or to send mail to someone else, and similar. I don't need any of them, so next step, and finally I have review of what I did. So I will cancel this and I will show you our user pool. So I have my user in group, so user, I attributes, like I said, I didn't ask anything. And one key thing to say is after you create a user pool, you cannot change the standard attributes. So you need to think about it before. So when you're creating the user pools, think about standard attributes which you require, and then it was fine. Okay, one last thing, or two last things. So there is also analytics, but this is for mobile devices. So for example, you can use analytics to track users, what they are doing in application. Then you get like summary and graphs and so on. And also, so this is I have an app client. So I get an app client ID, and later on in code I will show you how I use this. So there is also one thing for the federation. So I can use, so I can create my sign up, I can create users, or I can use Facebook or Google to populate my user pool. When I use this, I have automatically group for the Facebook or Google that I can use. And this is all about user pools. So the next one is the federated identities, and so I created an identity pool, which is not. So this one is easier than the user pool. So I have a pool name, I get an ID, and then I created the roles, which my identity pool will assign to authenticated users, so that I can access the AWS resources. And these roles. So and I have like unauthenticated and authenticated. So in my console, I can show you what role. So basically, when request gets this role, it can execute an API. That means that this role is allowed to call my API gateway, and that's it. And then I can also do something else, so call this for the different stages, like I have a development stage, production stage, I can just pass in here to narrow down this role. And yeah, so then identity pool requires authentication providers, and because I said that user pools in Cognito is identity provider, so you can use Cognito and rest of them. So to use the Cognito, you use the user pool ID and app client ID. So this is the application that I created, and I'm using this inside my federated identities. Later I will show you, or I can show you now. So because I think you already saw it, right? So you can use Google to sign in. And that was, so when I first started, I didn't activate the Google sign-in, only sign up. And when I talked to my colleagues, they asked me, okay, but can I just use my Google account that we use in the company and sign in? I said, okay, yes. So to activate this was pretty easy. So what you need to do is you go to Google platform and you create, so you can use the existing project or create a new one, and then you create credentials to open the OAuth client IDs. When you get this client ID, you also need to set up the consent screen, but that's the standard stuff. So you have this client ID, which you then use to. So Cognito requires only client ID, which was nice. But then I was curious, so because the colleague said, why only inside the company I can sign in? And that's also possible. So I can choose, so by default, everyone gets, if they are authenticated, they get this authenticated role. And I said here, when you're signing in with Google, if the email contains quote-centric, then you get this auth role. If not, deny. And so that's why I'm possible. So when I go Google sign in, hopefully this will work, and I select my account, and I'm signed in. So it was pretty easy. So I don't need to think all about other things, all out protocol and so on. Everything is here. Okay, so this was the configuration on the AWS. So now let's take a look at the code, because that's where the fun is. Okay, so the reason why in the beginning I asked for the serverless framework is I used that one to create the resources on AWS, specifically the DynamoDB. So everything starts with the serverless YAML file where, so I'm using the AWS, my runtime is Golang, and I'm in Frankfurt region, and then I have this role statement which is able to work with DynamoDB. I created my DynamoDB table, and then I have my 3 functions. I have the insert, remove, and list. So I don't know, I don't think it's so interesting to see how these functions look like, but the important thing is that Authorizer, like I said in the beginning, Authorizer is this AWS IAM, because that's what we get this temporary role, so it's secured. And to see this, so we have an API gateway, and like we have API. So this is my dev. So this is in my dev stage, and my service name is GoTill, because I also said it here. My service name is GoTill, and then when I click on the details, I have my 3 endpoints that I can use. It's the get, post, and delete with ID as a parent. And the important thing is that I have this auth in the method request. What I could use is, for example, if I want to open this publicly, it's simple as, so don't use this, use none, save it, and that's it. Pretty good. Then maybe additional one, I will show you one thing inside. For example, inside the insert function for when I'm creating a new stuff, the interesting thing is inside this request, so Lambda already has this request, which is a proxy request, and it has access to Cognito Identity ID, which is basically the user ID in my user pool. So when I go in my database, so when I go in my database, I have tables, and so this is stuff that I was creating, and this is the ID. And I have access to that inside the request, so I know who created the request, and later on when someone is trying to get all the items from the database, I just filter by the ID, and that's it. Okay, so this is the backend stuff, and for me it was really nice, or I was like fascinated that I just have to set authorizers, configure the Cognito the way I did, and it works. Now the other part was the React application and JavaScript. So using this Aws Amplify, it was really fast and nice. So I'll just close this. So when my app starts, I import the Amplify library, and I need to configure it. This is the part. So Inside the Amplify, I'm just using two things, the authentication and the API. For authentication, I'm just specifying the pool ID and the client ID, which we already, if we go here in settings, so this is my pool ID, the general one, and I have my client ID, this is the one. And I'm also requiring the identity ID, so this is the one. And I also need to specify the region, and that's it. So authentication is configured. Now I want to know where my API or my endpoint lives. So using the Amplify, I'm also configuring the API endpoints, and I have like, this is the name of my endpoint and actual endpoint. This is dev is about on which stage I am. By default, it's the development stage, but you can change it, and that's it. And also the region. So I configured this, and I was like, okay, so let's how to use it. So let's go into sign up, because that is what we did in the first place. So I hope so this is the input field. So we have the username, which is an email, password, and a nickname. So can you see this function? Is it readable?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So the thing is, I'm just using auth, sign up, and passing the properties. And if that doesn't have any exception or errors, I navigate to my sign up confirm view. And my sign up confirm view gets, so when I get the code, I'm passing in the username. So I'm calling the auth confirm sign up, then username and code. If that everything goes well, then try to sign in with the username and password. If everything is okay, go on the app. If not, go back to sign up or whatever page you want. And the sign in is similar. So I have this email and the password. So I have this sign in function where I say just sign in, username, password, and that's it. And so I was like auth and some function, and I was done. I didn't do anything else except this. And regarding I thought that maybe the Google sign-in or federated sign-in will be difficult, but then that was easy also. So I have Google sign-in, which then, so this is the way I get the token and the user from Google, and then I said amplify auth federated sign-in, and then I'm done. If there's no errors, I can pass into the app, and that's it. And this is the way how I configure this, and it was working. So now when I have this, I can concentrate on the business logic on my front end and on my back end, and I don't need to think so much about security. So don't get me wrong, security is important, and there are a lot of configuration and a lot of things to do or to check, also to integrate the MFA and so on. But for beginning, this was enough for me. And also federated sign-in works not only with Google but all other providers. There is even a simpler way for signing up, signing in users inside React. So I didn't try with Angular, but I think that's the same. So I have here opened, yes. So, but React has this what is called higher order component, which you just implement, which you just get from the Aws Amplify React library, and then you can use it like this. So hopefully you can see this, but he imported it with Authenticator, and then he used it inside the app. So this is the default. When you use this, you out of the box get sign up form, forgot password, sign in, confirm code, and that was even faster than I wanted. But for me as a developer, I wanted to play around to see how this function was used and so on. Okay, so we covered that. So let me see, is there anything else? Yeah, of course. So this was the authentication part. So now I'm signed in. Now let's call the API. So let's get the, I don't know, so we have here this, when I get the items, so when I'm fetching the data, I just say API, which comes from Aws Amplify. I say API get, and then the name. This is one that I configured. So, and then the base path, and my base path is /tils, which is my API gateway open, and then I get items. If I want to delete it, I call API del and post and so on. And it's pretty cool, right? Okay, so I think I have time to go back to presentation. So I had the demo, to the code setup. Okay, so before, thank you, are there any questions? So I'm finished with presentation.